West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Stephen Miller, one of the leading architects of the Trump administration's brutal family separation border policy, has now made fighting for the rights of white people a priority of a new legal group. Miller even waged a legal war against the Biden administration's efforts to even the field for minority farmers who have, as a matter of fact, for decades faced institutional discrimination by the U.S. government. And as CNN's Jessica Schneider reports for us now, so far Stephen Miller is winning.
We have multiple tools across multiple fronts to ensure that we are preventing terrorist infiltration of our country.
Stephen Miller, off in the face of former President Trump's crackdown on immigration, now continuing his conservative crusade, even after leaving his post as a top advisor in the last administration. He spent the past 2 years as the president of a right-wing organization that pledges it is fighting back against lawless executive actions and the radical left. America First Legal touts itself as the long-awaited answer to the ACLU. And just as the ACLU sued to block many Trump-era policies, AFL has filed a litany of lawsuits challenging Biden policies they view as anti-white. And just like the ACLU, they are flush with millions of dollars in new donations.
When did racism against white people become okay?
This is the ad the group ran before the midterms. But fourth-generation black farmer John Boyd, who says a lawsuit filed by Miller's group caused him to lose out on thousands in federal aid, argues the group is way off base.
I want to set the record straight. No one is against white farmers in this country.
Miller's group sued, saying the farm debt forgiveness program that gave preference to non-white farmers violated civil rights law. Congress eventually put a new program in its place, offering funds to all farmers.
White farmers were getting debt relief, and they were the ones getting all of the debt relief for all of these decades. And it's been blacks and other minorities that clearly haven't been getting debt relief. And that's what this whole measure was about.
AFL also challenged a COVID relief fund for restaurants that Miller's team said gave first dibs to women and minorities.
Joe Biden put white people last in line for COVID relief funds.
AFL filed both of these lawsuits in the conservative-leaning Northern District of Texas in Fort Worth, though filing in friendly courts is a tactic used by liberal and conservative groups alike. No one from AFL responded to our request for comment, but Miller told the Washington Post that after a never-ending stream of litigation during the Trump years, one of my goals was to try to help and inspire and coordinate a larger legal movement on the conservative side of the spectrum to do the same. AFL isn't just rallying against Biden's policies, but also a broad array of social issues, including transgender rights and affirmative action. They sued Texas A&M for relying on race and gender preferences in hiring, something Texas A&M disputes. Some advocates say Miller's group is taking the idea of reverse discrimination too far.
It's the use of grievance politics through the rule of law to try to exclude people of color broadly, but in certain pockets, black people specifically, from areas of opportunity.
And Miller's Group has a number of other legal actions still pending, and proclamations are on their website that promise more legal action to come. Jake?
Jessica Schneider, thanks so much. Joining us now to discuss, Congressman Jim Clyburn from South Carolina, a member of Democratic leadership. Congressman, what's your reaction to Stephen Miller's new group, this law firm that fights to block Biden administration programs that are trying to remedy racial and gender disparities?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Look, I have been saying now for more than a dozen years that I detect throughout the country and in a lot of legislative halls attempts to turn back the clock. I just finished today a mock-up in the Veterans Affairs Committee of two African Americans who came home after World War II. One of them was, while in uniform, was blinded by a local police officer here in South Carolina. Took his billy stick and punched his eyes out, denied any kind of assistance from the veterans, the so-called GI Bill. Maddox, up in New York, was admitted to Harvard University, but was not allowed to get veterans benefits because they did not want to set a precedence. That's what has been going on since the 1940s. And we moved to correct that in this country with the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Fair Housing Law of 68. These things were done to correct the traditional discrimination that had taken place against black folks. Now, we knew. In fact, I used to run the South Carolina Commission for Farm Workers. The veterans, the Agriculture Department was discriminating against black farmers, and all the records show it. The Pickford case is replete with it. And Biden administration moved to correct that. And now they're saying you're being unfair to white people. That is why today there are 8 less African Americans in the South Carolina legislature than there were in the past legislature, because these laws are now making it fair game to discriminate. So Miller knows what he's doing. They think they've got enough people on the Supreme Court to back up what they're doing, and so that's what's going on here. I would hope the media will not allow this to go unchecked.
You are the chairman for the House Select Committee on the coronavirus crisis, which held its final hearing today, which is why we booked you. And you say the committee's final report lays out that, quote, the Trump administration's poor management of relief programs left them particularly vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse, and that the previous administration, the Trump administration, prioritized politics over public health, engaging in an unprecedented campaign to undermine federal agencies responsible for protecting Americans' health and lives. How much blame for the poor response to the pandemic do you put on the Trump administration, and how much do you think our country's health agencies were just unprepared as opposed to purposefully failing?
Well, there's no question but that we were unprepared for this pandemic. And at our hearing today, our final hearing, I asked Dr. Corbett, who, as you know, is an African-American woman who's credited with having done the lion's share of the work on the Moderna vaccine. And she said to me, there are about 19 other variants out there that we are ill-prepared for. So that's what this committee was all about, trying to identify where we had problems in the system. And so when you get a pandemic and it visit a community that has already been discriminated against, already been ill-prepared health-wise, then it becomes a big, big problem. So it's a combination. I don't say that it was all Trump administration. No. This country has allowed inequality in healthcare to be a part of it for a long, long time. Inequality in education for a long, long time. These things run rampant. But all I'm saying is, when that exists and the pandemic comes, then those who are less prepared or more affected.
It is Thursday, the 15th of December of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, just a little now, okay? Don't want to get too spicy. On the other hand, can anyone get too spicy? Always a question up in the air. So, hey, we are headed headlong into the weekend, and you know what happens on the weekends now? Yeah, everything starts coming to a T, and then we're all tired on Monday. That's not how it's supposed to be. Okay, that's not how you recharge your batteries. Sounds to me like it's a constant drain. All right, well, it looks like the Young Republican Club, you know, they sound an awful lot like Nazi youngin to me. I don't know. I could be conflating it. They could just be a drinking club of a lot of underage kids. They have them, and they are still calling for total war. So I guess we were not going to get rid of this scourge by attrition. They keep, I don't know, getting some young'uns to keep up the mantle. Eek. For every generation, there's a goose stepper goose-stepping to their own drummer. Yeah, except their own drummer is the same drummer as everybody else goose-stepping to. It makes sense somewhere. And I know what's going to happen. We'll talk about this Young Republican Club in which electeds like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others showed up to. We can level the charge of Nazis, and in many ways we'd be correct, or at least fascists. We could call them fascists because that's how they are. You said that AR-15 is an assault rifle. There's no such thing. It means Armalite. Yeah, well, we didn't say that AR stood for assault rifle. We said that thing that you hold in your hand is assaulting my well-being. It is a rifle, so therefore an assault rifle. So shut the F up. No one ever says that to the guy holding the gun. No one. Not even me. Well, I have spouted off to a few people holding a gun in a very threatening manner, but who knows? I guess that's when I thought I was invincible. You learn quick, or you don't learn at all. Yeah, I've survived a few things. Missed. What would have happened if they didn't miss? Yeah, it would be totally different. And I wouldn't be so cavalier about it, would I? Anyway, so it's going to be total war. And we are still expected to sort of, I don't know, get down on one knee, express fealty to our overlords. Give me a break. Jeez. And then you got like Stephen Miller there at the top. And his law group. Is that a law group? Yeah, it is. I keep telling everybody, or trying to remind everybody, that the Nazis had a decades-long plan to subvert the rule of law, and they did, so that everything they did was legal under Nazi law. Okay? They took a constitution from, let's be clear. I mean, it was a burgeoning representative democracy. Yeah, they still had the Kaiser and everything, but they were trying. Okay? And the Nazis got the judiciary on their side, and, they wheedled and did this and, chipped away at the margins and the edges until everybody said, oh, yeah, it's like totally normal to round up hundreds of thousands of people and put them in cattle cars and let them go off into the horizon. I don't know, they just went off in the horizon. Had that, like, Doppler effect with the train signal. Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa, got just faded away. And everybody said, yeah, so, that's normal. Hannah Arendt interviewed those people. Not so much, she didn't want to hit the common person, but she had to bring it up. And, what about the guys driving the train? They were just doing their job. Where have we heard that before? Okay. So there's a normalization about the rule of law now. The prevailing dominant group is expressing grievance as being the aggrieved, discrimination against white people, racism against white people. The only people that say that kind of BS are fascists and Nazis. Give me an effing break. And this guy's out there. Oh yeah, America first, Sieg Heil. Yes, Santa Monica Goebbels. He was. I don't know if this is the proper term. I apologize. But he was, in effect, excommunicated by his rabbi. And his family, by and large, have disowned him as well. And he's known as Santa Monica Goebbels down there in Santa Monica because he went to Santa Monica High, and one of the first things he wanted to do was harass the Hispanic janitor. Why do we have this scum working in our schools? This is an example of equal protection and due process. This guy has equal rights to me. That was his spiel. Santa Monica Goebbels. Now he's running the America First law firm. Sieg Heil. Click your heels and goose step off into the horizon. Okay. We need not play anymore. How many more times do we have to be slapped in the face with their Nazi gloves? Those little leather gloves they always carry around, they slap people with it. When are we going to wake up? Master race my ass. Okay, I guess I could go on, but we do have somewhat of a read today. And I do intend to, and hopefully tomorrow I will get into the longer read. Should take, according to the article, there's a 14-minute read. So it's quite a bit longer than what we usually do here at the salon. But of the 23-year-old analyst at the Department of Homeland Security who came across chatter from right-wing groups about January 6th. So we will probably, most likely, knows how I'm hedging my bets. we'll get into a much more deeper read on that, hopefully tomorrow. But for today, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we begin, Congress passed a bipartisan bill to fund police de-escalation training because apparently they're trained now to think that everybody is a threat and kill them first, and you can always ferret it out later because of qualified immunity, I guess. You can get away with anything. Well, if you got that, maybe you should de-escalate the confrontation. They should. The U.S. government has finally sued Arizona Governor Doug Ducey and the state for trespassing on federal lands over the placement of shipping containers on the border with Mexico. And the National Labor Relations Board has ruled on new penalties for companies that illegally fire workers who unionize. Musk did that recently with those janitors. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a Turkish court sentenced an Erdogan rival to 2 years in prison for insulting public officials. And this is the guy who apparently is tapped to be the number one contender against Erdogan. And if you're in jail, you can't ever run for office ever again. He happens to be a mayor of a town there, too. And activists have filed a lawsuit against Facebook Meta over a murdered Ethiopian professor. It has the resonance of Radio Rwanda. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon site. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could possibly send us what you might spend on, well, how about an espresso-type coffee drink? If you could send us those funds once a month, it really helps us pay our bills. And I confess the bills are many to keep this, well, tiny powerhouse of resistance resisting in a sea of, well, dark forces arrayed against everything good and with light. And that, I don't know how else to put it. Well, I do. But for now, if you could afford to send us those funds once a month, it really does help us pay our bills and lets us continue to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. And of course, Tom takes care of that. And I will just mention that at some point, I suppose we will become more active in some of the other media platforms that we happen to be on. You know, I post the show to Tumblr, and I guess I need to go there. I thought that was a photographic site, but who knows? And I think we're on Instagram, and we'll talk to Kelly and Tom and see, if we're going to go ahead and open up a Mastodon account, post, Tribal. I'm a little hesitant about Tribal for a number of reasons. And so we'll find out where we're going, because it looks like if they're not paying their bills and they're trying to auction off furniture at the Market Street office building, I mean, come on. What's going on there? Anyway, you can also follow me on Twitter, while we still can, at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary. It will always be a diary, not a story. I don't care what they say. These diaries have been around for almost as long as blogs have. It's now Daily Co's, I should tell you, one of the oldest blogs still in existence. Anyway, I post that diary 10 minutes before showtime, and it has the show notes and links in which you can go and read the original article by the real reporters. Yes, you can. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Oh, did I mention just follow me at Justice Putnam, all one word. And then follow the show at Cookbook West. And, of course, please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, la-di-da. Yeah, they're everywhere. You can get them anywhere. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Oh, as a reminder, if you do go to the Daily Co's diary that has the show notes and links, in that diary, you can have my recipe for Metro Shrimp and Grits. Little detailed is a little bit more than the 3 ingredients that some chefs always insisted on, were the ones I worked with. But also worked with some great sauciers, and that's the way it goes. Sometimes you need more than 3 or 12 ingredients. Sometimes you need more than 12. Come on. But yes, my Metro Shrimp and Grits recipe is there for the getting. So do. This first offering comes out of the Associated Press by Farnoosh Amiri. In one of its final acts of the year, the House passed bipartisan legislation late yesterday, Wednesday, that would empower law enforcement agencies across the country to adopt de-escalation training when encountering individuals with mental health issues as part of an effort to reduce the number of officer-involved fatalities. Yeah, shoot the crazy people. And I know that's a derogatory term these days, but that's what they call them. Actually, I think they have some sort of police code, like, we had a 426. Yeah. Crazy person on the loose. You look it up, and it says right there in the manual, crazy person on the loose. Well, the bill passed 264 to 162 with Republican support and capped off a modest 2-year effort by Congress to pass police reform legislation after the killing of George Floyd sparked global protests against police brutality. The proposal, first introduced by Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas and Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, will now go to President Joe Biden's desk for his signature, and you know he will. The final passage of the bill comes months after the House approved a bipartisan package of public safety bills, including similar legislation that would make investments in de-escalation training and mental health resources for officers. That package was never taken up in the Senate. The issue is a perennial one for the nation. While nearly 1 in 5 U.S. adults has a mental illness, people who are untreated are 16 times more likely to be killed during a police encounter than other people approached by law enforcement. The Treatment Advocacy Center, a nonprofit dedicated to getting treatment for the mentally ill, concluded those findings in a 2015 report. The bill that passed the House yesterday, Wednesday, will amend a 1968 federal crime law to authorize $70 million in annual grant funding for law enforcement training on alternatives to the use of force that includes scenario-based exercises for officers. Role-playing. It will also require the Justice Department to develop a series of curriculum and training topics in partnership with stakeholders like law enforcement and civil liberties groups and mental health professionals. Maybe you should have the professionals involved. You're never going to make a cop a professional. I know a lot of them think that they are constitutional law experts because they had, 28 hours max in the police academy on constitutional law. So they're going to teach them how many hours of de-escalation training will they actually get. Chuck Wexler, executive director of the Police Executive Research Forum, a Washington-based think tank, said that what they have come to find out over the last 5 to 8 years is that the training is outdated. It does not live up to current day practices, he said. The organization Wexler oversees is the foremost policing think tank in the country, and it has been where law enforcement groups, both small and large, have turned to help educate their officers on the alternatives to the use of force. The 2-day training now has a long waiting list. The training effort began 5 years ago after the shooting of Michael Brown, an unarmed black man in Ferguson, Missouri, and has been updated since with fresh techniques. The goal is to take the training to as many of the nation's 18,000 law enforcement agencies as possible. But despite bipartisan support for the effort, some mental health advocates believe it will not resolve the root issue. You can provide as much training and de-escalation funds for the programs as you want, but it does not necessarily solve a lot of the problems associated with risk of death for people with severe mental illness at the hands of law enforcement, said Elizabeth Sinclair Hank, the director of research for the Treatment Advocacy Center and author of the 2015 report. That's because the role of law enforcement is to enforce public safety, she added, not be mental health crisis providers. Exactly. I do not think that this is a step in the right direction, but until we prevent some of these kinds of encounters between people with mental illness and police from happening in the first place, we have a long way to go, she said. Anita Snow from the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. The U.S. government sued Arizona Governor Doug Ducey and the state yesterday, Wednesday, over the placement of shipping containers as a barrier on the border with Mexico, saying it is trespassing on federal lands. The complaint filed in U.S. District Court comes 3 weeks before the Republican governor steps aside for Democratic Governor-elect Katie Hobbs, who has said she opposes the construction. Ducey told U.S. officials earlier this week that Arizona is ready to help remove the containers, which he says were placed as a temporary barrier, but he wants the U.S. government to say when it will fill any remaining gaps in the permanent border wall as it announced it would a year ago. I always say never negotiate with terrorists. Back to the article. The U.S. owes it to Arizonans and all Americans to release a timeline, he wrote in a Tuesday letter, responding to news of the pending federal complaint. Border security was a focus of Trump's presidency and remains a key issue for Republican politicians. You know, just in time, too. There must be some really good news coming out of the White House or some really bad news about 34 seditious insurgents who might have a criminal complaint drawn against them for their seditious insurgency on January 6th. Because now we're hearing in the news it's all about caravans of illegals again. Caravans. The Department of Justice complaint asked the court for Arizona to be ordered to halt placement and remove the containers in remote San Rafael Valley in southeastern Cochise County. The work, placing up to 3,000 containers at a cost of $95 million, is about a third complete, but protesters concerned about its impact on the environment have held up work in recent days. The complaint was applauded by U.S. Representative Raul Grijalva, a Democrat who represents southern Arizona. He called the project an illegal junkyard border wall. Gurley of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Companies that illegally fire or demote unionizing workers can now be held responsible for workers' financial demise, including credit card late fees, lost housing or cars and health care costs, in a move that could help some workers who have been fired from Starbucks and Amazon, labor activists say. In a big win for labor relations, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that to expand the fees and penalties the agency can collect from employers that illegally terminate workers for labor activism, both union and non-union. In a move long sought after by the labor movement, employees are not made whole until they are fully compensated for financial harms that they suffered as a result of unlawful conduct, said Labor Board Chair Lauren McFerrin in a statement. For decades, employers that fired workers for their involvement in labor organizing, a legally protected activity, by the way, have only had to pay for the employee's reinstatement and lost wages. But labor advocates say that has amounted to a little more than a slap on the wrist, especially for major employers with deep pockets like Amazon and Starbucks. Fear of retaliation and dismissal is the primary obstacle stopping workers from getting involved in union organizing campaigns, said John Logan, a professor of labor studies at San Francisco State University. Increasing the currently meaningless penalties for terminating workers is the most obvious thing to fix that. Under the new ruling, the Labor Board can also hold companies as well as unions liable for damages such as a wronged worker's health care and child care costs, immigration paperwork and visas, lost investment income, and legal fees for defending against unpaid bills. Well, some good news there. So let us then go to our break, and when we get back from said break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Emily Schwing. In September, a massive storm on Alaska's west coast brought a surge of water 17 miles inland from the Bering Sea to the Chupik village of Chivak.
The storm was crazy.
What was crazy about it?
It flooded down there. It was like a sea, but
it was like a ocean.
Some powers turned out, and some people had to sleep at the school for 3 days.
Just over 900 people live in this community. It sits on a high bank above the Ninglakfak River. Elder John Pengayak says the storm shook his resolve.
For 3 days I was in turmoil because I finally realized how dangerous our situation here in western Alaska is vulnerable from very high winds and water surge.
The impact of the storm, called Merbok, is very real for thousands of rural residents in western Alaska. Dozens of villages saw some level of flooding. People lost power, causing chest freezers to defrost. The power outages destroyed months of subsistence food that people spent their summers storing up. Food security in this part of the state is precarious, and on top of defrosted freezers, nearly all of the 90 or so boats people use to go fishing and hunting for their main sources of food in Chivak were damaged or destroyed. Pengayak says the losses are devastating.
It's our survival.
Yeah.
If I'm a Chupik, subsistence is mine. That's me. That's subsistence is me. Because I'm the one that's going out and fishing. I'm the one that's going out and hunting for my family. And we do it for livelihood and survival.
When the flood came in, it filled up with water, and then it drifted over and sunk
right on the river channel.
Clinton Slatts was in Chivac's community hall days after the storm to report his losses to 2 employees who the village's tribal council had hired to take reports on the damage. He wasn't sure if he'd be able to retrieve his boat from the bottom of the Ninglickfock River.
Hard to put into words how it impacts. It's just, I have no way to go hunt and gather with the remainder of the season by boat.
The storm didn't just destroy boats and motors. Nearly a dozen fishing sheds that held all sorts of gear, from rifles to nets to gas cans and rain gear, were destroyed. Some had completely disappeared from the riverbank. Elsewhere across Alaska, summer fish camps and hunting cabins were destroyed. And because the storm arrived in Alaska before the ground was frozen, coastal erosion was extreme.
And so, of course, it's much easier to erode material that doesn't even have any ice in there to help stabilize it even a little, as compared to the same storm, say, now, where things have started to freeze up.
That's Rick Toman, a climate specialist at the Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Policy at the University of Alaska Fairbanks.
But the warming oceans contribute to that longer period of time before freeze-up gets going. And that, again, is something that is sure to continue into the future.
He says conditions this year in the South Pacific were ripe for the development of a storm like Merbok.
Historically, the waters in that part of the subtropical Pacific are just not warm enough to support typhoon development. But this year, the much of the subtropical Pacific east of Japan is far warmer than normal. Some areas the warmest on record.
This storm was rare. Alaska hasn't seen anything like it in 50 years. Dozens of rural communities saw infrastructure damage in addition to flooding. Many scientists, including Toman, believe the storm, which originated as a typhoon in the northwestern Pacific, is a harbinger of what climate change could bring to the northernmost U.S. state in coming years.
Certainly we know a big contributor to the increased impacts isn't that there are more storms, but rather storms are coming when there's no sea ice.
As the coldest months of winter bear down on Alaska, there's still currently no significant shore-fast sea ice along Alaska's Bering Sea coast or further north along the shoreline of the southern Chukchi Sea, other than around the mouths of rivers. It's a phenomenon that's become the norm in recent years.
In the 20th century, there would have been sea ice to offer protection or act as a buffer or a wave break. And with that gone, the impacts have increased.
After Merbok developed as a powerful typhoon, it made its way north and east toward Alaska. As it did so, it grew into something meteorologists really don't even have a word for. Some people called it the remnants of a typhoon. Toman referred to it as an ex-typhoon. But that kind of language doesn't do justice to describe its power or immensity. By the time it slammed into Alaska, it had tripled in size alone.
Over the long term, there's not any good hard evidence that the intensity of these storms is increasing, but the background that they're working in, a warmer environment, a less frozen environment, is really, I think, the driver of the impacts.
Residents in dozens of western Alaskan communities continue to repair damaged homes and outbuildings and to apply for disaster assistance through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the state government, and other organizations. What Merbok laid bare is their vulnerability and the extreme need for improved and strengthened infrastructure as such storms become the new normal in the region. For 60 Second Science, I'm Emily Schwing.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hit him well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
What does a town bylaw that permits going topless on the beaches teach us about democracy? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In May 2022, Nantucket, Massachusetts passed the Gender Equality on Beaches bylaw. That bylaw does exactly what its name indicates. It allows everyone to go topless on the beaches in that town if they want to. Of course, anyone can wear a top, and everyone is on notice that some people on the beach, regardless of gender, may not be wearing a top. In Massachusetts, new town bylaws are subject to review by the state attorney general to determine if they comply with the state constitution and state law. In early December, the Massachusetts attorney general ruled that the bylaw legally was just fine. As the longtime town resident who proposed the bylaw explained, this is righting a wrong, allowing the space for all bodies to be topless and catching up to what was already legal for men. But it wasn't always so. Indeed, until the late 1930s, it was a crime in most states and cities for men to go topless, to expose their nipples, even on a beach. A crime for men. Obviously, that changed. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis famously wrote that in our federal system, states are the laboratories of democracy. Similarly, for states, local governments, as here, can function as laboratories of democracy and equality. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2005. That was the day the labor movement lost a man who was willing to go to jail to fight for the rights of working people. Clinton Jenks was born in Colorado Springs in 1918. He learned of labor consciousness from his father, a postal worker. During World War II, Jenks served as a navigator for the Air Force. He was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross. After the war, he became involved in supporting the needs of veterans. He served as the president of his chapter of the American Veterans Committee. Jenks became a business agent for the Amalgamated Union of Mines, Mills, and Smelter Workers. In 1950, he helped Local 890 to carry out a 15-month strike against the Empire Zinc Company in New Mexico. The union members were predominantly Mexican-American. The story of that strike was told in the iconic labor film, The Salt of the Earth. In 1951, Jenks was elected president of Local 890. He was jailed for his involvement in labor actions and held in solitary confinement for 16 months. After his release, he was again put on trial. This time, he was accused of being a secret member of the Communist Party. It was illegal for labor leaders to have ties to the Communist Party after the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act. An FBI informant claimed Jenks was a communist. He was tried and convicted. Later, the informant admitted he had lied about Jenks. In 1957, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned his conviction in what became known as the Jenks case. The story of Clinton Jenks shows that even the loyalties of a decorated war veteran can be questioned if he dares to stand up for the rights of working people. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid to upper 40s, so a little warmer than it was yesterday. Mostly cloudy at the moment, and will be partly cloudy later on. And winds will be light and variable. Clear skies overnight, lows in the mid to upper 20s, winds remaining light and variable. And then sunny skies tomorrow, highs remaining in the mid to upper 40s, and winds remaining light and variable. And it looks like Monday, late Sunday night, Monday is when we are forecast to have quite a big storm coming through, which means the East Coast will see it a bit later than that. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the moderate range at 65 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.37 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles. And relative humidity is at 95%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 33 degrees and fair. Paris is 34 degrees and clear, continuing with their active freeze warning. Rome is 60 degrees and mostly cloudy. And Kyiv is 33 and cloudy. Kabul is 37 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 60 degrees with light rain. Tokyo is 42 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 58 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 45 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy, with an active gale watch. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Kareem Fahim and Zainab Karadas of the Washington Post brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A Turkish court yesterday, Wednesday, sentenced Istanbul's popular mayor, a political rival of President Erdogan, to more than 2 years in prison on the charge of insulting public figures, a verdict that underscored concerns that opposition figures will be prevented from fairly competing in upcoming elections. The mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, will remain in office while the sentence is appealed to higher courts. If confirmed on appeal, his conviction would result in the mayor being barred from seeking public office. Recent polls have shown that İmamoğlu is among a small group of opposition figures who could defeat Erdogan in a consequential presidential election in June. Erdogan's popularity has been dented by his management of the economy, which has suffered from skyrocketing inflation, rising unemployment, and the collapse of the local currency. İmamoğlu, speaking last night, Wednesday, to supporters in Istanbul, called the court's decision an ugly result. Age 52, a member of the opposition Republican People's Party, or CHP, İmamoğlu rose to prominence in 2019 after defeating a candidate from Erdogan's ruling party in the race for mayor of Istanbul, a political thunderbolt that handed the opposition control of Turkey's largest city for the first time in decades. Erdogan's Justice and Development Party, or AKP, challenged the initial vote, which was overturned by the State Election Council. İmamoğlu, though, handily won the revote, a stunning defeat for the president that cemented the mayor's stature as a figure who threatened the AKP's dominance. The mayor has not declared his candidacy for the upcoming elections, which are also being held for parliament, but why not jail him, just in case?
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Naomi Nix, also of the Washington Post, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The son of an Ethiopian academic who was murdered during the country's ongoing violence has filed a lawsuit against Facebook parent company Meta in Kenya's highest court, alleging the social media giant is fueling violence and hate across eastern and southern Africa. Abraham Merrig Amare claims in the lawsuit that his father, Merrig Amara Abra, a Tigrayan professor, was gunned down in November of 2021 after he was targeted on Facebook with hateful and inaccurate posts. He said he tried to get Facebook to remove some of the problematic content, including a post with a photo of his father, but he did not receive a response until after his father was killed. If Facebook had just stopped the spread of hate and moderated posts properly, my father would still be alive, he said in a statement. I'm seeking justice for millions of my fellow Africans hurt by Facebook's profiteering, and an apology for my father's murder. The lawsuit alleges that Facebook's algorithms are more likely to promote hateful and violent content because that attracts engagement on the platform. The legal filing also claims that Meta underinvests in content moderation in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. Merrick is bringing the lawsuit along with another Ethiopian researcher and a Kenyan civil society group, the Katiba Institute. Meta spokesperson Aaron McPike said in a statement that the company uses feedback from civil society organizations and international institutions to guide its policies and safety work in Ethiopia. We employ staff with local knowledge and expertise and continue to develop our capabilities to catch violating content in the most widely spoken languages in the country. The lawsuit is being filed amid a bloody conflict in Ethiopia. The war started in the fall of 2020 after Tigrayans held their own elections in defiance of Prime Minister Ahmed. The TPLF, a regional political party, had ruled the country for 3 decades before Abiy came to power in 2018. When TPLF forces attacked an Ethiopian military base in Tigray, Abiy, a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, launched a military offensive. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.